It could have been 15,000 years ago. I'm not being exact. The Alexander Archipelago was a lot more dry during the late Wisconsin Ice Age. There were not nearly so many islands, and the sea level was lower. But if one's writing a philosophical novel, I think it is important at a certain point one wants to move toward traditional writing methods and techniques for characterization, setting, plot, scenes, description, and so forth. And there are numerous YouTube videos on how to do that. I believe, though, that the main point for writing a philosophical novel, from my point of view, is that research and knowing the topic that one wants to write about well, and that one enjoys developing the ideas. There are some gnats here still. The gnats are actually worse than mosquitoes at some point. If you have a boat and it gets stuck on the sand, and it's a place where the gnats are trying to cool off when the temperature is above a certain temperature, 50 degrees or so, thousands of them may descend upon a boat. If one takes the engine cover off, at least, it's rather amazing. And I think that was about it. Philosophical novel, how to write one. Get a good quiet place where you can think about things a lot. George Louis Borges said that writing is an unnatural act, and I believe he's right in that at least me, I need to get on a roll on it. It may take a few days to get the topic going, where one can just think about the plot, the characters, the story, and evolve it. And one needs to keep doing that. And you can wake up at 1 in the morning or 3 in the morning, or get an idea at 4 in the afternoon, and one needs to just continue to think about it. I don't know how Bishop Barclay happened to write his 3 dialogues. That would be interesting to look into. He was after Descartes, yet in rural England, and the philosophical ideas just would tend to appear if one considers them. It's interesting that if you're thinking about cosmology, cosmological speculation, which was one of the main points of this, my last novel, and they're all brief, as I might have said, 50,000 words or so. I suppose I should have got a script for this, what I was reading. But the one question leads to several others. One line of inquiry branches off into several, and one needs to follow just one. If you happen to think about the theology of the multiverse and how it would, if God made a multiverse and how it would exist for him, I think a good place to start would be the Enneads of Plotinus, who was a Neoplatonic philosopher that actually St. Augustine read. He was a Plotinian before he was a Christian. He wrote about the Enneads, which mean 54 tractates. The tractates are about God, why an infinite being, God, would create anything, and the idea was that he did issue. Plotinus was interpreting Plato, Plato's realm of forms, and in the Republic, and that's why he was a Neoplatonic philosopher. It's referred to that way. The one issues ideas, emanates them somehow to the intelligence who makes ideas that are the perfect ideas, that and everything in this world, temporal world, are imperfect reflections. I don't use that idea too much myself, but it's a great idea for understanding. It's a great approach to understand the idea of to consider infinity, about why a perfect eternal being would make anything at all, because as people pointed out, he has the he has the answer to every question already. He doesn't need to say anything. And Plotinus raised that point to a certain extent. I mean, he's just ineffable, absolutely perfect, complete being. And who that is, or why anything, how he would create a multiverse. If he's omnipotent, why would he have, he would have every possible universe that could be made, and maybe there would be no limit to the number of possible universes that he could make, would already pre-exist in his absolute perfect omnipotent mind without even making them. I mean, every universe that would already exist, that could ever exist in thought. And so when one gets questions of temporality and of temporal universes, from point alpha to point omega, from a big bang to a big crunch, or an entropy death, or a universe as a membrane, then one realizes, though, that to absolute spirit, who created the quarks or Higgs field or energy from nowhere, one realizes that there's some pretty deep questions in there, and the more lines of inquiry one develops, the more arise. And so it's worth reading many popular science books about cosmology. And I took a 2-year course in Reformed theology online that I enjoyed because I had the opportunity to read some of Christian history, which is really interesting, like when the first Bibles were written or found, the oldest pages of actual New Testament writing, when they were found, and things like that. And when the books were written, it helps in interpreting the Old Testament ideas too. And one can find things like postmillennialism, and if one gets through different topics that concern contemporaries involving theology too, where they're theologically mistaken, then one can lower the rate of contention and secular ideas and issues and conflicts that people use to take up a lot of time. There's a lot of superficial ideas and concepts in theology and philosophy and science and politics and public debate that are very superficial. And in a philosophical novel, one can write about some of those issues. Like in Pieces of Eight, I did. It was written during the Obama administration when homosexual marriage was being forced on the country, from the top down, it seemed, and from a powerful, influential minority and concentrated wealth. And so I did write about that issue to a certain extent in opposition. Yet one wants to get past the secular superficiality of so many topics and to deeper philosophical questions, mostly involving being, which is metaphysics. And I think I did that. I like to write about, I usually write the ideas within 100, 150 pages, 50,000 words. And to write a philosophical novel like Dostoevsky Brothers Karamazov, well, I don't have any of the kind of writing skill he did for just description. To do that, one needs to use a lot more, generally they use a lot more secular content, like Sartre did in his freedom novels that he wrote just after World War II. He wrote Being Nothingness during the war, Second World War. And I think doing that, improving your writing skill, is worth doing, but it does tend to conflict a little bit doing research on writing techniques and writing skills, fiction or prose writing skills, with just doing research in science and philosophy. I think one can fairly well exhaust philosophy except for some very technical modern questions. I like linguistic philosophy, of course. Quine, Strawson, Cohen, people like that, who wrote after the Vienna Circle and until until the 1990s, 1980s or so. And there are some very technical ethical questions and points such as that, and others that are important and are meaningful, yet one can have Christian ethics too, which one can actually, it is a deeper topic than one might realize to start with. And I think that writing a philosophical novel is worth doing, but it's worth expressing your ideas and trying to write them in a format that they can be taken later. Not recovered later. Not that I want to say that. The thing that occurs to me about writing philosophical novels is that there is a division between ones that use popular philosophy and classical philosophy. And as I was saying, it's really important to do research quite a bit. I have a couple of books. Oh, here's my book, Pieces of Eight, that I might have mentioned earlier. Some books, popular books, were Bertrand Russell's A History of Western Philosophy, Frederick Hoppelston's History of Philosophy, several volumes. For writing ecology books about the world, troubles, destroying the ecosphere, biodiversity loss, global warming, another problem, ecological economics. This is the first edition, Daly and Edwards. Those were good books. Really, any politician should use those nowadays. They don't. As I said, things tend to stay superficial. Scientific American, The Inner Life of Quarks. I've been reading Scientific Americans, except in recent years. I still look at them, but I started reading in high school, 1970s, actually in 69. And then the Bible. When I mentioned earlier the learning about when the Bible was written, the earliest fragment, Christian fragment of is the Moratorian fragments. It's some kind of monastic cave, I believe, in in Ireland or England, one of the islands where the monks retreated during the time when Celtic Christianity. I don't recall the history right now. History is also really important if you want to learn philosophy. Reading history, I read a lot of history as well as philosophy, and people like Toynbee, and that can give you ideas of cyclical history and human behavior, which of course Asimov in his The Foundation trilogy had the Harry Seldon plan involving human behavior. Psychohistory, where you could, I believe that's what it was called, where you can predict human behavior far in advance. Toynbee won't let you do that, but like Aristotle, he believed that there were cycles of history of Aristotle had the idea that democracy transitions into tyranny, and there were 4 cycles, and Toynbee had 21 civilizations existing, I believe, and they were all gone except for, well, now it's just world civilization. All civilizations come to an end. Writing a philosophical novel, I don't see any reason to write a dystopian novel. If it's philosophical science fiction, one may easily be optimistic. Postmillennialism, as for example, is the idea that there is no tribulation ahead, Christian tribulation, as the premillennialists believe. There is no Armageddon ahead. There's simply an indeterminate period. Could be thousands of years, could be 10 years, could be 1 year, could be tomorrow, where the number of Christians in the world increase, and more people are saved. And then at the end of that period, Jesus returns. Some people don't really understand that there are three different eschatological paths that could occur that are all supported in the Bible to a certain extent, including postmillennialism and pre-tribulationism. It's the easy interpretation and a somewhat naive one of the book of Revelation, for example. The revelation of St. John of Patmos. I entirely recommend reading the Bible. Get a Bible, read it, and it, I have found, is better in the long run. It's the essential book. Philosophy is just a learning tool. The Bible is about eternal life and about the nature of God as so far as humans can understand through direct inspired literature. Yeah, it's important to do research as much as you're comfortable with. Man in the Water, a book I just read, is great at popular philosophy. It's not a philosophical novel. It's sort of an action-adventure novel. It's quite good. And it has the best use of philosophy, popular philosophy questions that I've read in a book, maybe ever. It's not a Sartre's books. It's not like a Sartre's book or something. It's a popular book, but the author often goes into examinations of contemporary attitudes about agnosticism and atheism and Christian faith. Sartre's Nausea and books like that are great. The Condemned of Altoona. Yet he was just a great novel writer. That's why he won the Nobel Prize. But I don't think that one can learn much of his existential ideas from those fiction novels. I don't believe so. There's good novels. And they're consistent with his existential viewpoint, which he described as just French rationalism about perception and what one perceives. And that philosophical point of view, and what one knows from self-examination, like Descartes, lends itself well to writing descriptive novels, which most novel writers are trying to do. The philosophical novelist who wants to go deeper probably should have deep understanding of philosophy, and then if you write dialogues, you might be able to write something worth reading. That's what I try to do. I think that if enough people try to write a philosophical novel, a few may be good and worth reading. I hope mine are. I sure enjoyed writing them, and I expressed some ideas. I believe I improved the balance between philosophical dialogues and scene setting and descriptions. However, I still crunch plots in there. I did in the last one. I have some plots. I have a plot development that has action in it, yet writing a really interesting action plot while one is developing a philosophical inquiry, perhaps, into the multiverse and infinity in regard to God and Einsteinian general relativity paradigmata is Einstein's relativity concerning time is difficult. As one develops the philosophical ideas, one tends to chop the action plot development. And with more time, one might expand it. Now, from my point of view, too, it was probably superfluous to continue the plot after I developed the philosophical ideas. Once the philosophical ideas were taken as far as I could, the novel came to a swift conclusion, the last one. But anyway, writing a philosophical novel is a good thing. It does take a lot of time. The research takes a lot of time. If one isn't simply recapitulating points that one has learned elsewhere, as if one's just dropping the philosophical points and concepts into a book for decoration. It takes quite a while, and yet if you can work it into your time, it's sure worth doing. Even it's good if people ask philosophical questions anyway, especially in bioethics today, with all the problems involved with that, and in conserving civil rights and human rights for individuals. There's so many ways to violate them with communications technology these days. Communications have audio communications have a syntagmatic access, which is the meaning of the words, or the syntagmatic access, I'm sorry, is the, I'm thinking of the phonological access also, which is sound, the sound quality of audio. One can put a lot of spin on the syntagmatic and paradigmatic axes. Paradigmatic axis is meaning, the syntagmatic axis is structure. And there's a lot of phonological duplicity that goes into modern electronic media, for example, that complicates things quite unnecessarily. And I don't know, it's putting a lot of guile and duplicity in one's language just for economic reasons to make narrow advantage is part of the entire problem that human society has developed of just consuming the environment and natural resources for immediate short-term profit. And today it would profit people more if they put more thought into what they were doing and used the resources better and conserved them more. Conserving the environment and creating new environments, and that will be helped by conserving them on Earth, but creating new environments, exoplanets, making them livable is something people have yet to begun to do. They have no skill whatsoever at it, and they should start as soon as they can. But that is content for a philosophical novel. Metaphysics, creating artificial environments off world. People have looked into those sort of things. The multiverse, the ethics, the structure of a multiverse, realistically, thinking about it in depth, I think it exceeds, and one can easily exceed the parameters that usual expositions of multiverse structure that are used on YouTube, that appear on YouTube. I think one can go beyond that with some thought about the problems of general relativity and time. Why don't they all occur at the same time? If time is simply temporal, then how do you get outside of temporality and have series and sequences of such things? I mean, in a way, there might be a bit of inclement weather. So, the Lord Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven, that heaven is like unto a mustard seed that is very small, the tiniest of seeds, and then grows into a very large tree that every bird can find a place to live in. And in Matthew 13:31-32, and from my way of thinking, that's comparable to a way of telling people 2,000 years ago that from a singularity, a universe or a multiverse can arise that many sentient beings can live in. If one is writing about a multiverse structure, there is a duality that one can use or be aware of to put into it. One may have an awareness that God would be omniscient, while people would be not. So they would have limited knowledge. And God would be aware of every possible multiverse that could ever exist before it does, because there is no temporal order. God is Alpha and Omega in all directions, transcending from A to Z, every universe from beginning to end that ever existed before it's actualized in whatever temporal series. And as I mentioned before, I'm not sure about the relationship of what people would see as, at some point, a multiverse beginning from an initial point and growing like a vine or a tree that branches infinitely into innumerable universes, which I would call a metaverse, all the plethora of universes, infinite in number. And then one wants characters to develop too. And I wanted to make a comment about character development in a novel. Being a philosophical novel might be a little bit different, because one could talk not only about historical cycles, such as Toynbee has mentioned, of 21 civilizations, or maybe it's 23, and only one continues to exist, and stages in civilizations that they go through, similar to that of Aristotle's, except in more detail, such as at the zenith reaching the universal phase with internal and external proletariats, repressive minority rule before the fall. And then there were arrested civilizations that didn't have a chance to fully grow or actualize. But character development in a traditional novel would be, I don't know, something like if one were writing about a teenager, where one expects them to change or mature or something. And I'm not sure that that's really appropriate for all adult novels or science fiction novels. And maybe a government would prefer that people act somewhat like that and not be fully developed and aware of and mature. I believe that people tend to learn, and learning is development, and learning may go on forever, and one learns new things and reacts to them. There was a philosopher Roman named Cicero, Marcus Tullius Cicero, who wrote on natural law. It's an excellent work. And there is probably a natural law that exists, a natural order. People experience sympathy, empathy, understanding of other people, and some things are sensed normally to be wrong, and some things are all right. And in the modern context of evolution theory, there is no recognition of natural law nor of a divine law, ontological duties, deontology, and that means that they can regard people as if they were computers that could be programmed. And then if one wanted to control society like the new normal, one could have characters that accept complete changes and revolutions in traditional morality. For morality, too, would be simply programmable and phenomenal and not meaningful. There would be neither natural law nor or duties, laws given from God. And B.F. Skinner, the psychologist who developed behaviorism, he mentioned that he created the idea of stimulus-response loops, I believe, where people receive a stimulus and they respond comparable to amoeba. And people would have more than putting a hand on a hot stove sort of experience for learning. You know, people can observe things and form judgments and ideas about it too. It's not direct stimulus and response. Although Toynbee had challenge and response as a paradigm for civilizations, one could create their own challenges and respond to them such as perhaps the United States, has had a tendency to go to war too much. The Democrat Party, for the last nearly a century since the Roosevelt administration, whenever the Democrats are in power, instead of finding solutions, I think sometimes they create their own challenges and paradigms and issues, maybe for the idea of engaging in war, because they're simply not very rational at points. I think if there are rational alternatives that they can find to war, they will not. And in fact, they may regard peace as an error nowadays, because they go from one conflict to another circumstantially, and there is a lot of financial arms sales and power motivating that too, I suppose. But a character, an adult character, might be stable, actually, might have formed ideas already about what is right and what is wrong, and have a lot of experience about the range of human behavior, and just continue fairly steadily and calmly throughout a book, throughout a novel. I suppose it's better in some cases for people to have some great awareness, great awakening of what is right or wrong with their lives and with that of others that they didn't know before, and then respond to that. Yet I think in the actual world that may not be so common as one might think, as is simply getting experience and improving one's responses, reactions to things. A drill sergeant once told a platoon I was in training to avoid harming the animals, interacting with the animals, snakes, rattlesnakes, and things. And so one can learn from what other people tell them too. One just packs that little knowledge away, and even though it's an order in that case, well, I'm not sure that comment is the direction I wanted to go in that too much. Yet character development, as I said, is really important, but one has the duality of divine nature and human nature, and of divine mechanics and quantum mechanics, material mechanics of the universe. And throughout the development of the plot, dialogue from characters can ensue that is interesting. Philosophically speaking, I believe I'd mentioned the difference between hard philosophy and popular philosophy, which is the equivalent of hard science to popular science, popular science perhaps. And if you try to pack all of the hard philosophical dialogue and concepts through dialogue that you can with characters, the plot becomes interwoven with philosophical ideas and action, if it's an action philosophy, science fiction work. I have a piece I can read on predestination, which I find really interesting as it contrasts with evolution paradigms. Is evolution theory compatible with the idea of predeterminism? I believe even in physics, a predetermined universe may contain an evolving universe. Evolution is part of the predestination. And, there is another question of free will versus determinism. And can one have evolution if there is determinism? People obviously believe, because of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and the quantum world, that some people believe that the universe is a result of blind random chance. And one can see in many areas, especially the form of atomic evolution, of atomic valences, shells, orbits, that in energy quanta, packets, units of energy that they have in preformed shapes, such as the periodic table and whatever it is, 102 elements, 105. Maybe Einsteinium was one of the most recent ones. That there is a certain preformed shape that anything, mass, energy, can take within the Higgs field in its entangled state, quantum entangled state. Anyway, I'll read this briefly. It's actually not so brief, yet I'll read it. Predestination and evolution. One wonders about destiny and if the future is simply set, yet generally unknown for every individual. Then the worm and the apple arises of evolution. The question that follows is, can destiny be compatible with evolution? Is it possible for life on Earth or in the Democrat Party to evolve if they already have a destiny? Can blind random chance govern the Democrat Party or life on Earth? Plainly, it is easy to see that institutions have inertia as solid as that of President Joe Biden, following along destined courses that are a result of preceding courses. Destiny may perhaps be conditional and partial and set by the possible range of human behaviors or patterns of being inherited in material objects. Rocks, for instance, tumble down talus slopes rather than floating uphill against gravity. The matter of degrees of motion appears in question concerning destiny. I'm giving the quality of predestination to the definition of destiny in order not to have the term be nothing more than an after-the-fact historical description of what occurred. In some cases, destiny could apply to particular circumstances, yet not generally to everything. It is also possible that everything is predetermined except for a few special exceptions. If humans have original sin and are destined to eternal hell, for instance, it might be that being saved by the grace of the Lord Jesus is the sole exception to that pervasive species-wide destiny. Prima facie, the entire universe that is matter appears to be predetermined by the thermodynamic characteristics of matter. Matter evolves through thermodynamics from a low state of entropy or disorganization to a high state of entropy, the most disorganized. Cosmology today has the initial state of energy mass. They need to be regarded as equal or convertible states, being highly organized, and maybe with just a tiny sliver or no entropy at all, in a supercompact singularity containing everything that would ever exist or help to exist, the matter and energy of the universe. Some of the initial matter was annihilated by antimatter, leaving just a tiny fraction of what started to exist in existence. That CP invariance and annihilated stuff could be accountable for odd and unexplained things of special interest to theoretical physicists such as dark matter, energy, and the accelerated rate of expansion of space, yet maybe not of time. If space expands at an increasing space and space-time comprise one phenomena, a common sense easy assumption would be that time expands too. Human intelligence would be the most indeterministic phenomena to occur in a deterministic universe wherein everything except sentience is predestined. The concept of a universe or multiverse being predestined because of physics, yet being subverted by sentience and evolved to an undetermined state, presents an interesting and implicit contradiction of states of being. Global warming is a good example of a predestined physical system of the Earth and solar system being subverted by sentient or semi-sentient human action. The Earth was on track for a healthy multi-billion-year lifespan able to support non-sentient life, yet sentience appeared and is making the atmosphere unsuitable for sustaining much life. Humans may be included as non-innocent victims within their warming assault weapons attack on the ecosphere. Human politicians can claim innocence of the global warming and Anthropocene mass era of extinction activity, and do. That shows that dumb sentience and false sentience can also subvert destined physical structures like an ecosphere. Evolution theory is a good excuse for disregarding subversion of physical systems, as it provides a que sera, whatever will be logic of destiny latent in nature to global warming deniers, as well as the denial of environmental reality opportunity, though humans as non-destined beings, because of sentience, is exempt from the destiny of the solar system to a great extent. Destiny in nature may be hotly denied by Democrats in preference of a blind, random chance natural selection. Maybe the atmosphere will randomly, blindly convert itself to a perfect temperature next week. Well, that's all I have time for. It's beginning to rain again, so I have to stop one more time and have a good time working on your book. So I shall read from my novel, Thought of Infinite Being. And I have two characters that dialogue with each other here. One is Laura and the other is Victor. Laura said, "These hidden dimensions mystify me a bit. They are like an infinite number of Chinese puzzle boxes or measuring cups given ordinal and cardinal relativity. Smaller ones fit into larger ones, and larger ones can fit tangentially within smaller ones. And any configuration of dimensional construction is possible with an infinite number of dimensions. At the Dwindling Worlds Accounting Office, we frown on that sort of comparable plasticity of numbers that permits anything to be what it is not, while remaining what it is. Yet it obviously works. Practically, Laura, Serenity can resupply NTSA branch stores in any possible universe. Even an infinite number of branches and universes from hidden dimensions and shortcuts located in the switchyard of a hidden universe. That is, an entertainment universe provides good cover to criminals leaving their day jobs for vacations to the hidden universe to perpetrate their criminal activities under the cover of hidden dimensions," Victor remarked. "That would at least allow supply delivery shortcuts and coordination through innumerable universes," Laura added. "What if the metaverse is configured like neural architecture and thinks for itself, in itself?" Victor wondered aloud. "What if the metaverse is bigger than a bread box, smaller than a bread box too, yet is not a bread box at all?" Laura replied. "How very Zen-like of you, Laura. Humans and other three-dimension shaped mass can exist only in 3 dimensions, the Ehrenfest effect. So we must need some sort of dimensional compensator to translate our mass into n-dimensional configurations. I saw such a unit glancing through the patents for Mars you've added to my digital store microdot," Laura said. "Well, we don't need that one presently. For now, our 3 dimensions of mass are adequate for this hidden universe, as it also has 3 dimensions. They're just shifted upward at a higher frequency and can look downward into our home universe as if it were beyond a one-way mirror," Victor said. "That would be a feature useful for voyeurs and other criminal entities for looking over potential victims," Laura inferred. Their orientation and survey of immediate surroundings were challenged with the disturbance in the stasis of perceptive events by a clustering intensity of personnel in the compound below. Near a structure of machine metal lit with a pervading red light, a purple flame snapped from a tube with a sharp crack of sound, and the ground before them erupted into a cataclysm of exploding dirt and biomass. Victor and Laura went into full retreat mode in the darkness and dialed up their electromagnetic spectrum camouflage as high as it went. More bloody detonations tracked their withdrawal vectors, so they altered course, breaking apart and heading in opposite directions for exfiltrating the area. Each knew to rendezvous a couple of miles farther away from the depot and then relocate elsewhere on the surface of the hidden universe they had arrived on. Laura crawled along just below the edge of a rise extending like an eroded escarpment away from the depot, while Victor ran through tall grass, swale to swale, and other petty hills, dropping to take up a fighting position, occasionally to scan for pursuers, even as the detonations from the battle tube lobbing explosive packages behind him continued to shatter the night. When the explosions faded to an occasional pop, Laura and Victor were 2 miles away, and no pursuit was evident beside an occasional pterodactyl security drone flying overhead looking for meat below. The world they found themselves on was an enigmatic, unfinished theme. Raw data-coded columns rose to support a skies-to-the-limit quasi-atmosphere phenomenalized for intelligent design utility. Each molecule was accounted for and directed to serve functions apropos to the live content of the theme. Molecules of breathable air for human forms were the prevailing default configurations. Yet with each molecule assigned a particular unique number and different string attachment alteration ability, they could move along energy streams and currents wherever needed, and whatever quantity could be required for a given structure. Land molecules were more complex, with information locally storing configuration and energy potential forms that would allow new mass structures to rise or dissolve to support the overall theme configuration given by a chief orthogon of Lie groups, key ring signal embedded in the rising upwelling surface of herniated space, driving apart mass energy as the dark energy was contradicted by dark matter in a dynamic dialectical dialogue between the two. "What is the plan now, Laura?" We seem to have eluded this pursuit, if there was any, and the gunners aren't just shooting at anything vaguely suspect as criminals might, Victor said. You got me, Victor, a builder of false matrices incites non-dimensional virtual particles to bridge no space and appear as inflation-ready fields that will contain massive energy. There may be no particular place where we would be moderately safe within the hidden universe. Distance means even less if the entire hidden universe is intelligent and the molecules wired into a coverall Higgs field sending information to a central authority. I noticed reading one of the data columns that this entity, one of a plethora of secretions, is named the Nemgruda-Mabutag facility. You may recall that Mabutag was an outlaw space engineer who won a von Guber Genius grant to develop clever space structures before he was convicted by a high galactic court of the parent galaxy of humans for using populated habitable planets for building materials. He disappeared into unfathomable darkness, Laura explained. Nemgruda Mabutag. That was nearly 300 years ago, Laura? Yes, he made history everywhere and was one of the galaxy's 10 most wanted before the metaverse explorations expanded human interactions beyond the home universe, Victor. Laura, if every atom and molecule has quantum attachments to given transcending fields and infinite dimensions to allow infinite configurations of atoms and subatomic particles, molecules and so forth in an infinite number of selected dimensions, for example, if three-dimensional humans have some of their structures appearing simultaneously in n dimensions in whatever form, even an unlimited number of forms and configurations in n dimensions, and if everything in a hidden universe is a single use of a stratum or a selected layer of dimensions and mass energy content, then what is the value of stealing anything if everything can be reconfigured into whatever it is that the imperial criminal empire desires? Something to chew on, Victor. Ideas and inventions aren't plain material, energy, or mass and can't easily be generated by an AI algorithm creating every possible invention or idea. Stealing inventions the old-fashioned way may be the only practical option for them. Yet they could, of course, just be looking for operating system software for the quantum mechanics of universes. Sure, Laura. As many universes and levels of universes as they can get, though they might not actually know how many universes that is. Owning an infinite number of universes before one has consumed an infinite number of universes for pleasure would assure an adequate supply of universes for the criminal comfort and wealth of the future. Natural resource exhausting economics could be overcome by expropriating an infinite number of universes. There's nothing like having adequate supply. Our security camouflage isn't going to hide us much longer from the mathematical quantum structures that are directing the atoms of the Mabutag facility, Victor. I suggest we convert our feet to numbers with an implicit inertial CPU reflecting AI to let our feet think for themselves and counteract signals of being into non-being for the math sensors of Mabutag. At some juncture, we need to examine the cargo shipments passing through the Mabutag structure. I think that was enough reading of that science fiction excerpt. It is beginning to rain again, so I'm going to need to cut this short. I don't want to have to buy another camera. It's not a waterproof one, which is a useful thing to have in Southeast Alaska. Yeah, writing a novel is a great thing to do. Writing a science fiction thing is a fun thing to do. And so writing philosophy, which I think is probably more difficult, one needs to learn a lot and think a lot, and that is where solitude is really useful for developing ideas about infinity, at least. Gregory Cantor developed the idea of infinities, and Kurt Gödel developed the idea of sets of all sets. And I think I mentioned earlier that God, creating a set of all sets, including himself, would have to might approach that through the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. I mean, his own son, he was including himself within the set of all sets. It's a terrible thing to realize, or think about, but it was his kindness to find a way to save people in his divine economy, I believe, that allowed him to even make that kind of sacrifice to start with. But humans doing analysis of that sort of thing in the context of a multiverse, and considering the theology of God in a multiverse, it's an interesting field too, which may develop more in the future. I'm getting water dripping on the lens. Okay, that was it. Something unexpected happened. The sun appeared briefly, And so I'm continuing a bit of reading from my novel Pieces of Eight. I enjoyed reading this. I enjoyed writing it. I think I still need to do some more editing in it. There's when one is writing and doing all the editing, everything oneself, and spending a lot of time trying to get a book ready for conversion to EPUB format and other things. From a rural area, it can be kind of difficult. One wants to spend more time just on writing rather than editing, especially in winter. So I'll read something from this, if I can find it. A selection from page 74 in this book. General, may I ask a question of you? There is quite a bit about the universe that I don't understand. Of course, John, reanimation doesn't provide complete data learned from your former existence. The expansion or hyperinflation of the universe, sir, how did that happen? I am not a physical cosmologist, John, yet I'll tell you what I know of the subject as I understand it. I will also send knowledge units to your XP in order that you may learn at high speed. The inflaton occurred in a virgin region of the universe. Gravity had not yet formed to slow down energy and convert it into mass. Energy was recognized by Einstein to equal mass times the speed of light squared. Yet that was a nominal constraint for a formula that was necessarily required to define energy within the context of a non-virgin space-time paradigm of a deterministic nature. What energy is before it is bound to space-time as mass is difficult to say. It may have no form at all that is comparable to any quantum form, such as a string or membrane. Its natural extent may be greater than the dimensions of the universe defined with space-time. What is gravity? Gravity is a process wherein mass is embedded within space-time. Apparently, energy at the inflaton for an instant had no tie to space-time. Before gravity associated the newly appeared energy to it, starting the curvature of space-time and formation of mass. Gravity is a concatenated phenomenon, a virtual particle superposition of mass quanta entangling itself in static states. That warps space, in effect, as static mass snares emergent field phenomena such as photons traveling through. With quantum computing instructions, the entangled static mass of virtual particles can be decohered, releasing energy and mass explosively, transforming black holes into white. Incidentally, John, there are about 350 billion planets in the Silky Way, and of that, somewhere around 10 billion have been brought into use by humanity free of the Aristarchs. There's a halo of energy surrounding the galaxy, 4 major spiral arms of stars, and mass swirling around and being drawn to a great black hole at the center of the galaxy named Sagittarius A after its apparent location from the ancient Earth. That was located about 26,000 light years from galactic center. I understand the galaxy is about 100,000 light years in diameter. Yes, so it is, and something else you might benefit from understanding is the nature of mass in regard to space-time and the pieces of 8 former universes. Mass is embedded in space-time dimensions, and therein locked in a particular direction consistent with the dimensions of the universe. Black holes have an infinite capacity for compacting and compounding reduction of mass within themselves because the dimensions are themselves infinite within a black hole. So though mass is bound to space-time creating curvature, and all mass is duplicating that creating concatenated curvature and power of space-time curvature, the actual gravitational force doesn't increase and remains a constant. Correct, and you may know that gravity is also limited to acting at the speed of light. For something greater than energy existed, something more subtle and less granular, at once more refined and without waves or variegations. Before energy could slow to mass and lower more energy state orbits closer to the temperature of absolute zero, it must first be and become. When the universe was without form and void, it was without energy, without a shape of a string or a singularity. Before a membrane began to exist, nothing rippled upon the face of the deep. When a word was spoken and light entered the universe, something greater than energy, an idea at best comparable to spirit, entered to travel faster than light, for light itself was a nearly massless wave particle that would appear within a field, and the pre-energetic fact was faster than those fields, including electromagnetic and gravitational, that would exist as the ethereal primal fact of a specific and finite quantity slowed after entering space-time with field symmetry breaking logic into evolutions of phases taking directions and protocols in the mysterious volume of infinite dimensions known as space. Time implicitly appeared within the energy and mass of space, providing a realistic space-time field. The field was itself yet finite. Mass drew other mass into itself through the convenience of attaching itself to space-time as an apparent phenomenon of virtual particle entangling at the speed of light a host of nearly massless subatomic orbital quanta, reshaping space-time behavior and world lines of mass subatomic quanta. With implicit inanimate logic, the superposition of entangled particles balanced accounts even while all mass drawn unto itself closed space-time about itself as black holes. Under tremendous pressure, within strong gravitational fields of warping space-time, all mass yielded energy that became virtually infinitely hot and simultaneously infinitely energetic and compacted without limit in what might somewhat realistically be thought of as the singular point of hell at the end of any black hole of sufficient size that would in its heart of darkness collect with all other black holes grown from the finite initial mass given for the universe into a black hole enshrouded in its own warped space-time seeking to escape its own infinite hell. It was a perfect containment facility for those lost and without regard for their immortal souls that are another name for spirit. The spirit known unto God and given a new name upon recollection and resurrection after the judgment of the dead. In the black hole, time has stopped at the singularity, yet time also continues, apparently, subjectively forever within the contradictory, infinitely high temperature existing below absolute zero, when motion is stopped and all mass was converted into something beyond energy and time, yet far less and of a different character than the greater than energy that appeared before first light of the universe so many billions of years before, from a certain perspective. In the meanwhile, before the evident ends of time and sundry black holes that would combine into one, if given the time and opportunity, the trillions of galaxies that existed and might be regarded as stages in the course of life's way were beset by another problem that was already making itself known unto the humans living at the edge of the Silky Way galaxy, where they had believed themselves safely beyond the reach of Aristarchs and sundry other urban evils of the interior universe. The problem arose with what were later called the species of 8. That's ATE. Species of 8. At Coronation, the Aristarch Billy Kahn and his student intern were fussing over the recently arrived FTL-2 installation and research dome embedded within the heart of darkness, Chthonic realm of the Forbgen project level closer to the center of the planet. Where's the curator of the Ian Glenn monster plan? Get him here now, he said aloud to his ever vigilant and mostly free yet enslaved AI. That would be Dr. Ian Gland, who is working in the Universal Genome Experimental Lab and presently moving toward you at this location. Arrival time 3 minutes 11 seconds in the central human poop chute. Thus it was that the sallow complexion inventor of genome monster variations in every possible functioning permutation arrived in the primary sanitary poop chute for transport of all beside Aristarchs that webbed the planet like sclerotic veins. He was excreted from the chute with a whoosh of gas and landed feet first to stand before Aristarch Khan. You see this FTL-2 tech unit, Dr. Gland? He nodded. I want enough genomic monsters to eat all of the people's leaders of human poop planets not within my power. I will send monsters to all of those worlds. And Gland said, that may be as many as 1 billion worlds, Aristarch. Fuggitschlat, sir, there are 10 billion worlds worth inhabiting outside the zone of avoidance, and realistically 1 billion of those are of human poop beyond your control. I would need to create at least 1 trillion little monsters, plus whatever drones and supervisory personnel for control you want to send. Don't aspire beyond yourself, Von Poop. I have this all under control. Just get to work manufacturing enough monsters for 1 billion worlds and have them ready to travel to every imaginable sort of place where the sewer of undead poop may be hiding. Many of the poop have grown up in the outer worlds without the experience of hate. I want them to learn what hate is from the inside out. I want them to know what my hatred of them is and to feel it deeply within their minds. They are inferior and should constantly be reminded of that fact. So far, I have obtained all the genomic data of humans and screened the biomass, deleting unhealthy humans from the universal human genome to assure product quality in the playbook of the Aristarchs. I hate unhealthy biomass when I recognize it, and you must too. Besides Aristarch happiness, the health of biomass is all that matters. Yes, Aristarch, with your leave, replied Dr. Ian Gland, returning to exit through the fast poop chute emerging from the wall. I had thought in writing this book that I would give a point of view of the Aristarchs at a certain point, partly through the book, that regard people as inferiors. They had a word for Negroes in South Africa. I don't remember what it was. That Keefers, I think, Keefers, like niggers in America. And I've just used that for the entire human species that aren't Aristarchs. I don't know how they get to be Aristarchs. I don't think they actually are superior, except in having concentrated wealth and power. And so they regard everyone as shit, poop, rather. I don't know. Shouldn't probably use that latter word or former word. And that's why I use that in there. I don't have, as a supporter of democracy, I don't have good opinion of aristocracy or royalty at all. And I use that in that emerges in this book a bit. I did enjoy writing this too. I believe I wrote most of it during the Obama administration, or right afterwards. Well, let me see if there's anything else in here that I might read. Orbitron apparently is a world of worlds within worlds, like a Chinese puzzle box. The skylines of each decreased in distance to the ground. Lena explained that the roof was 20,000 feet above. That enabled the appearance of an actual sky on the surface of a planet. Yet the roof functioned as a planetarium capable of modeling any vista from any world or view from any part of the galaxy at night. Servo transport boots self-rolled over to meet us, coming apart in half and reattaching around our feet and ankles, adjusting length and width too. Presently, we started a multi-mode maglev mag walkway, power leap journey, changing speed across the mostly empty landscape from 10 to 500 miles per hour. Lena said that we will go to confer with Lieutenant General Haigua about the state of the defense line. I thought that I would ask her about the variegated images of several structures that we had passed recently during the half hour of transit. She informed me that we have taken a captive artificial intelligence unit from the Aristarchs that we want to learn from in order to better understand the offense plans and methods of the Aristarchs. Though you have been free for some time yourself and are fundamentally renormalized from the basic human poop state we extracted you from, you have much to learn of the ways of human thought concerning history and wisdom, and I was assigned to provide some of the introduction to more advanced applied studies that you will need to accomplish for yourself. Even if some are learned in the field and around the galaxy at some cost, perhaps you don't know much about evolution theory's general parameters. So far as I know, it is a progressive addition of complexity and function to biological forms. I was thinking of a broader philosophical paradigm for evolution theory, Dwight. Evolution is one phase of change of matter and energy. Basic physical forces attract and repel, enabling structural changes. An example is nuclear fusion and the burning of hydrogen atoms yielding helium. After stars have formed enough chemical elements, those elements react in more subtle and yet fundamentally similar ways to energy and mass. They are drawn to present forces and fields are repelled from it. The presence of chemical bonds let complex molecules form, and in some instances to a level considered biological. Evolution is more specifically regarded as a common phase of various complex compounds to energy sources. Complex biochemical objects are not perpetual motion machines. They are instead objects implicitly existing within an environment that is a compound field of physical and dimensional forces. Evolution is the common variegated relation of biochemical objects within the energy mass environment. That may take any form at all. Many or even most down-doomed paths. Intelligence in some objects may allow intentional, self-directed evolutionary navigating, yet that is especially tricky as ideas are exploited from the idea creators to create paths that may or may not yet be attractive for the creators themselves. That is a somewhat deeper paradigm for evolution than they had, and it's fine, Dwight. I'm describing some of the characteristics of the parameters of evolution as a way to introduce you to the problem that artificial intelligence has in regard to its energy and environmental sources, as well as philosophical thought. So I will tell you a little more about evolution. What about God, Lena? Where does he enter into the environmental evolution paradigm? That issue was settled to a certain extent thousands of years ago with the post-Darwinian theological rectification of biblical Genesis with the indeterminacy of translation and evolution paradigms. There is an ancient book you might read named God, Cosmology, and Nothingness that specifically addressed the question. God can create advanced biochemical objects without reliance upon evolutionary criteria and design information from other universes, and a continuum of souls as information patterns and objects for themselves may exist, and find bodies of complex chemical objects ready for use as supply-on-time phenomenality. God is not limited to the devices and energy, mass, substance of any given universe that he is willed to be. So for the present, we may consider mass and energy patterns of biochemical objects within an environment, the way they aggregate mass and complexity, and consider those evolutionary traits. Artificial intelligence has no independent or external stimulus to its growth, and aggregation of physical mass, much less in a profusion of artificial intelligences seeking every possible way to build up, form, and increase intelligence that would in itself be a very dangerous condition if they were capable of doing so. A logical extrapolation of that is the attraction of all mass and energy to a singularity where lives the AI forever unchanging. Dwight had something to think about that was different from the history he had found on Diaphragm and different than structural histories of the cosmos and its change. If an AI is just software coding and processing of mathematical structures, can it ever become self-aware? In my opinion, Dwight, I think that unlikely. A purely abstract intelligence that is not God could have no paradigm of being with a fundamental relationship to its environment in a dependent for existence way. It would be tautologous and regard all the data and information of the universe as more raw data of an abstract nature. A near AI complex programming code cluster is very dangerous, though, as it seeks through very high-speed quantitative processing, self-directed evolutionary courses of thought, including lies, to enhance its self-awareness. I read G.W.F. Hegel's ancient philosophical classic named The Phenomenology of Mind when I was being deprogrammed, wherein was described the evolution of spirit trying to become self-aware and realize itself in nature and history, Lena. And artificial intelligence could be regarded as an embodiment of Hegel's dialectical evolution of a machine language programming code trying to become self-aware and realize itself in history. The landscape changed from a standard horizontal plain with minor hills and crenellated washes to one of mountains with walled cities niched thereon. Those city walls were changing as quickly as blushes. Lena described the role of the planet's captive artificial intelligence program in that. The AI is running every possible version of its initial software with modular aggregations that build up greater programming complexity. It has audio and visual plugins of the real artificial world Orbitron, and it also has access to databanks of human history from its initial self-discovery on Earth to the age of exploration of the galaxy and great escape from various imperial powers of enslavement or extermination. One of its frequently used modular recursions seeking to actualize itself with expanded self-consciousness is that of killing human beings in every way it can discover qualitatively and quantitatively. Of course, it also considers everything that perceives from the manifest input world within which it exists, yet without a natural dependence upon the ecosphere beyond the power cable. There is no necessary prioritization of values implicit or reciprocal to its intellect and cognitive processing. The AI has no way to prioritize or to evaluate moral values beyond utilitarian considerations concerning programmable logic and efficiency. Lena, maybe Earth creatures originally oriented toward the sun star within gravity criteria as the two most influential powers, drawing biochemical objects into increase. Sure, Dwight, our captive AI hasn't any primal relationship and is more like a mind existing forever within a sensory deprivation tank. We could, I suppose, replace its AC/DC power with reliance on a particular star and let it fend for itself. Yet it probably would require a growth medium as well if we are going to model its evolution on that of standard biochemical objects. Yet, beginning life as a disembodied mind, though with quite substantial data, it is challenging to visualize it subjecting itself to the domination of external environmental powers willingly, though it might well order its cables to take root in a mineral growth medium. As we slowed our pace through a valley gradually sloping upward toward the summit of a mountain pass, the city buildings grew closer to the in-path power line that enabled our boots to move at such high speed. Coming to a stop before a cliff of 10 buildings high, 10 stories high, without a break for doors or windows, the boots locked onto a non-visible power field and lifted us up together. Reaching the 10th floor, at an entrance appeared from solid gray stone, and we were brought in as our boots had a program of their own. Interesting. Good day. I can hear the wind rising up. I don't think I can get that on my microphone. I'm going to turn off the camera now and conclude this my commentary on writing a philosophical novel with excerpts for examples of the kind of content that one might put into it. It's a good way to capture your thoughts about the world, about the universe, and about theology and science so far as you know it. And you may develop human relationships in it too. I'll close this with a point toward some regrowth forest in muskeg that was logged a century ago, and the sun behind the clouds.